Hi everyone, welcome back. So in the last session, if you didn't see us, I went through and I reviewed how to access the program, at least the first, join our community. So I reviewed this so that you knew how to go through and navigate the classes and how to access the journals, things like that. What I want to do in this session is I really want to talk about what we believe, and I am going to utilize this screen. It's going to be shifting, but I do want to talk a little bit about how we approach addiction recovery specifically. And in that, one of the most important things for me is to help people understand that, first of all, we don't say that other recovery programs shouldn't be what they are. We have an approach that actually supports other programs. So we're not competing with anyone. This is more of an educational based program than it is a specific, you have to follow our specific path to end up somewhere. We actually are here to help you create your own path. So the goal is to educate you. And once you understand how the brain is functioning, then you can create your own program that works, because everyone is different. So one of the first fundamental things we work on is, first of all, helping people understand what really drives addiction. Now, we hear a lot about dopaminergic pathways, and we hear that they are the cause for addiction and that is pleasure. It's for the pleasure. But that is inaccurate. I stand by that firmly. Addiction is not about pleasure. And I speak this as a former addict. Addiction is about a relief of suffering, and that's why most medicine is now calling addiction self-medicating behavior. So what's happening with addiction is we have this enlarged amygdala, we have this overactive fight or flight response, and it's miserable. It's difficult some days to be in your own body. It's difficult to communicate with people who don't understand, to explain to people what it's like. So many people say, well, just quit, just say no. And if only we could. These are subconscious mechanisms of the brain trying to survive. So what's happening is we're in this state where we're so miserable, where our suffering is so high that we seek the addictive, whatever our choice of addiction is, to relieve that suffering, even if just for a minute. I'm hurting so much, I'm suffering so much that I want to feel better for just a minute. A lot of people that suffer addiction don't even know what real pleasure feels like. What they're doing is they're having a relief of suffering that feels like pleasure, because not suffering feels better than suffering. And so in this, what we're doing is we're going into this survival mechanism that's saying, this has made me feel better in the past, so I'm going to use it to feel better again. Of course, as all addicts know, is that only works for so long. Eventually that thing stops making us feel better. And I'm going to educate the participants on why that is. Why is it that it only works for so long? And why do we go actually to these things to relieve pain that actually end up causing more pain? I'm going to explain that. And then we're going to talk about how to stimulate the same brain function we're trying to stimulate with the addictive substance in a different way. Now, this isn't just substitution. This is not just coping mechanisms. We are going to deal with coping mechanisms. But what I'm talking about doing is actually changing the amygdala, shrinking the amygdala to reduce the suffering, which then eliminates the need for the addictive substance. For me, as I went through addiction recovery, I got to the point, and I remember for me, the moment when I quit using hard drugs. So I had been in therapy for a while, and I was starting to understand a better life was possible for me. But I was being told by my therapist and my recovery program that I would be an addict my whole life, and I would struggle my whole life and have to fight the addiction. And I understand why they say that, because according to traditional recovery methods, you do. And so what happened for me was, I remember I was coming down off of a drug that was one I used a lot, but it was a drug that when I came down, I would get migraines, and I would be gripping my hands, so my fingers, my nails would be cutting into my palms. I would be twitchy and everything tense. And so I remember I was in the back seat of a car, and I had just spent the night high with friends, and I was sitting in the back seat of the car, and like I said, I'd been in therapy, I think about 6 months. I was 23 at the time, and I was sitting there, and I suddenly thought I was grinding my teeth, and I was having the migraine, and I was cutting my hands. I was just miserable. And I had this really lucid thought in that moment that said, how bad was my life that this felt better? And I think that's what we need to realize with people suffering from addiction, is that, first of all, you're not broken. It's not a disease. I know calling it a disease was about getting the respect of the community to treat it, but it's not. It's actually a healthy mechanism of the brain responding to unhealthy consciousness, an unhealthy brain pattern. So what's happening is the brain is malfunctioning, not by the fault of the addict, but by the fault of DNA or by the fault of experience. The thing is that we're told that that's permanent, and it's not. We can alter that brain function that's causing the addictive pattern. So in this, I remember realizing how miserable I was. And at that point, I stopped using drugs like that. It was just that moment of clarity. And this happens for a lot of addicts. I mean, any addicts that are sober right now, if you're even looking at this recovery program, you've had some moment of clarity. But a lot of programs don't, I mean, they may realize you're suffering, but the personal experience of suffering, I don't think it can be explained. To suffer so much that it drives you to addiction cannot be explained to other people. They can't comprehend it. This is part of why I have a family support program too, to help them understand, and also the suffering they've experienced, because being in relationship with addicts creates suffering. But I remember that moment of clarity for me and how bad I wanted. I was still an addict. I was still an addict for several more years after that. I just changed my addiction. I now use therapy as an addiction. I still drank at that time, and I still had issues with sexual addiction, with PTSD. I had complex PTSD as part of my the cause of my addiction. But this brain function, what's happening is the brain is triggering a fight or flight response, and the amygdala is triggering. So whether you're under threat or not, the amygdala is triggering, and now what we're doing is we're trying to calm the system back down through our addiction. So what we really want to do is shrink that amygdala so it doesn't trigger so much, and also to start training the brain to respond in a different way, because what we really want to be is free of our suffering. Now, I take a fully scientific approach. I do include meditation, and I do talk a lot about this concept of freeing from suffering. I don't want that tied to any specific philosophy, because I'm not approaching it from a philosophical perspective, that the word suffering is a coincidence. But it is the meditations and practices taught in Buddhism can be a very, very helpful thing, because they are part of those practices that can shrink the amygdala. But I want to take a completely scientific approach. And so what we do in the program is, the first thing we do is learn how the brain works. Why is it triggering? what does the trigger mean? And then how do I measure it? So we learn to observe ourselves. We learn to notice, oh, am I upset? Am I angry? Oh, that just triggered. I can change that by changing the brain function. Rather than trying to resist and fight the anger, rather than trying to fight the addiction, rather than trying to go up against it every day, what we're going to do is change the brain function, and then all of that goes away organically. And so that's why our program is different than other programs that might be available out there. Is basically, it's just a different approach, and that's why it also works with the other programs that are available. This is why you can already be in treatment and using programs. You can be in a 12-step program, you can be in a therapeutic program, you can be in any program and it'll still work, because all we're doing is talking about, oh, this is what the brain's doing. Also, it can bring clarity to your program. Why do I do this exercise? Why does this help, but this doesn't? We can start to understand why those things do, like that individual nature. Because if we understand the brain function and how the brain works, then we can use the program to utilize the things that work best for us, because we've all been in some type of treatment, any type, whether it's addiction or not, where people have said, this is what works, this is what's going to work for you, this works for everyone. Nothing works for everyone. All of us are very unique. Now, our brains all work the same way. So we do need to trigger the right brain function, but how we trigger it and the results of that are very unique, very individual. So we're going to talk about educating us on how that brain works, tools that work, why they work, so that we can adapt them to use what's going to work best for us. So what I want to do now that I've given you that general idea, I'm going to go much deeper than that in the actual program, but I just want to make sure I gave you a general idea of what we have available. I do want to say, if you missed that video and you go back to it, I went through this join our community. Now, what I want to say about this is this group participating in this. So you can see we have 3 options here. Now, this first choice does require an email login. The reason why is it's going to track your progress throughout the course. So as you do things and you're marking them complete, you want to be able to track that information. Now, not everybody, especially people in recovery, want to share even an email address, and I get that. And so in creating this, I created an opportunity to continue anonymously. Now, what I want you to know about this section that's continue anonymously, it does lack some of the things that the other group offers. So what we're going to do is, in this one, you won't have the journal, the daily journal that's available, but I will list the questions. So I'll be adding into this place where the questions are listed that are in the journal. You just won't be able to type because the program is going to use the email address to track the content that you type in. So you won't have the opportunity to type it in, but I will have the questions listed so that you can still maintain a daily journal, because it's really important. And this isn't journaling that is, oh, today this is, I had this and then this happened. This isn't that kind of journaling. This journaling is specifically to trigger certain brain functions that we want to promote in this course. So you'll have those questions. The other thing that you won't have that you'll see in this join the community session is you can join the live Google events. Those will be in there. You can find a meeting. You'll have the practice videos and meditation videos, but you won't have the group forums. The reason why is those are tracked by email. So if you're going to comment in the forum, you need to have your email address entered. And so we won't be able to have that. But you will have the lesson plan. So the only thing you'll be missing is the group forum and the journal. Other than that, everything will be the same, and the way it operates will be the same. So, but it gives you that opportunity to be anonymous. You can participate and progress yourself forward without feeling like you have to compromise or choose between what feels comfortable to you and what doesn't. I understand what it's like. Sometimes the shame or the actions that we've taken as addicts have put us in positions where it is hard to participate in society, and I get that. So I want you to be able to continue anonymously. I like to let people know too, this program is as close as your telephone. So if you go onto your phone, log on to yourwayrecovery.org and save it to your home screen, there will be a little icon that is this icon here. That is our logo icon. That icon will show up and you can use it like an app. So you can click and access all of your stuff right from your phone if you don't have access to a computer. So that is available. You'll also still have the event calendar and everything else. I think that's it for this particular session. And I'm going to talk about in the next session is the impact that addiction is having on our country and what motivated me to start this. Thank you so much for being a part of what I do. Thank you for being here and engaging in this.